All right, hey everybody. I hope you can hear us. And you have joined the Institute for the Study of Business Markets and our webinar. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes while you all get settled in and get your screen set up and find a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever your favorite beverage is at this time of the day. Our talk today is the science behind visual cues in UI UX design. And ABalliett is the CEO and founder of Killer Visual Strategies. You're going to love this talk. So let me tell you a little bit about who we are, just using up that time. So it's while you're getting ready. You have joined ISBM. We were founded in 1982 out of Penn State. And it was a collection of leading academics who were doing research in B2B marketing and companies that were B2B marketing companies, with the whole idea that research needed to be done because everyone was focused on B2C, but 60% of the markets are really B2B. So today we have nearly 40 member firms. We hope you're one of them, but if you're not, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help talk to you about how you can join us. We have 29 academic fellows for which you get direct access if you're a member. And we have amazing B2B instructors and partners that teach courses that you might need. And you can find all of that at isbm.com. So again, I'll just introduce Amy. She's the CEO and founder again of Killer Visual Strategies. And she has been working in SEO and in marketing and headed up SEO at several companies before she launched Killer in 2010. She's grown that to be the industry leader in visual communication, driving visual strategy and creative content campaigns for brands such as Microsoft, Boeing, Adobe, Nikon, Starbucks, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the United Nations. She's looked at some really good stuff from a whole bunch of places, and she has communicated those in a way that you are going to want to learn. Absolutely. She speaks at lots of conferences that include South by Southwest, Adobe, SMX. She's regularly teaching at the School of Visual Concepts and guest lecturing at colleges and universities. She's a LinkedIn learning instructor, and now that she's talking for us, that means she's on our list. So if you have a question for her later, we're going to put you together with Amy. She's the author of a new book. I'm going to hold this up because she sent it to me, and I will tell you that this is fascinating. I have flipped through it and I have shared it with others already. So if you're looking for a way to communicate what your complicated concepts are to your customers or your supply chain or your upper management and have it stick, she's got this for you. You're going to love this talk. So let me pass on to the next slide. A little bit more about us. This is our team. You see me there and Rand Mendez if you reach out for us about membership. Our fellows, there's just a short list of where our fellows come from, and they're our connection to the latest information and the latest research. Here's a smattering of our member firms and the company you keep. And then here's what's coming up after this. So October 15th, we have Eric Jokenstaller, who's from Vivaldi, and he'll be talking about the interaction field, and I'll be interviewing him for that one. In January, early January, we'll have our next Marketing Excellence Roundtable where you can get together with fellow companies and your peers and get better at marketing. We have one more course scheduled this year, which is new product blueprinting in later October. And then if you've ever missed anything at all this year, everything we do is recorded. You can go back and check it out or look at our curated content on B2B Pulse. All right, how do we work this one? If you have a question during the webinar, you'll see either at the top or bottom of your screen a little taskbar, and there's a Q&A in a folder. Click on that and type your question in. Type it anytime. I'll be watching what questions come in, so Amy can just keep talking. And if it's critical, I'll interrupt her with a question, but otherwise we'll use the questions at the end. And just keep typing as you find them. We won't forget you. Can you get these later? Yes, is always the answer. So if you want to see this later, give us about 24 hours or so and it'll be posted in the Pulse library. It'll also be on isbm.com. And if you registered for this and you didn't pass your registration to someone else, if you registered for this, you'll also get an email that gives you a link to all of that. Okay, so I'm going to get ready to turn it over to Amy if she's ready, and then I'm going to stop sharing, Amy, and you can take it from here. This is our contact information. I'll put that up at the end again when we're answering questions if you want to get a hold of any of us or Amy. All right, Amy, I'm going to stop sharing and you can take over.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are having a really good day today. We're going to kick things off by talking about what visual communication even is, because the term visual communication can sometimes feel like a loaded phrase. It's a phrase that's been around for decades upon decades, but it has consistently changed its meaning over these decades. But for the past 10 to 15 years, visual communication has really had a very strict focus. It's no longer just about graphic design like it used to be. It used to just fully encompass all of graphic design. But today, when we talk about visual communication, we're talking about graphically representing information to efficiently and effectively create meaning. When necessary, limited text is used to explicate the meaning. And that's a lot of what we're going to discuss today. We're going to discuss how graphic imagery represents meaning and how you can be using it both in your UX and UI design as well as in your marketing. And a really big line here that's really important as we're level setting today. When necessary, limited text is used to explicate the meaning. So in other words, we're going to be talking about using the visuals to drive information and to drive action and not relying heavily on text. And you're going to understand why as we dive into the science here. But to really kick things off and get started, I want to start with a story. This story is about a star versus a heart. Now, in 2015, Twitter was seeing a very big problem on their website. Sadly, the problem still exists today, but as they really were having a big kind of outcry on Twitter, they decided we're going to try to fix this problem. Now, the problem was simply the fact that Twitter was being used as a hotspot for outright debate, where people would go back and forth and start kind of, getting into real heated debates with one another about a variety of issues. And what's interesting is they actually started really focusing on a single button within every tweet that exists, and it was a star button. Now, this star button, the functionality of it was that of a bookmark tool. You could star a tweet and have access to it later. So the original goal of that button was simply to make it easy for people to bookmark tweets and reference them at any point in time. But people weren't using it as a bookmark tool. Instead, what they were doing was using it as a kind of final say or a virtual dropping of a microphone, if you will. Basically, they'd be in the middle of a heated debate, and when somebody felt like they had the best final word, the best kind of got you moment, they would send the tweet and then hit the star button. What this would do was signal to the person or people they were debating with that they were done with the conversation, that they had said their final piece and they were out. So like I said, kind of a virtual dropping of the microphone. So Twitter was trying to figure out how to make their experience more friendly for everybody, more peaceful, how to encourage more peaceful interactions within the website itself. And so what they did was they took that star, a small 16 pixel by 16 pixel image that sat on every tweet, and they changed it to a heart. They didn't change the functionality in any way, shape, or form, but they just changed the image itself. Now, this simple, very subtle change sent the Twitter universe in uproar. So many people were incredibly infuriated that this simple image, as you can see how small it is, that heart right there. They were in uproar that it was changed from a star to a heart. It actually caused a mass exodus of about 15,000 Twitter users in a day, which was the most that they had had in a single day. It actually also caused people to complain for many months going forward. But eventually, people forgot. They forgot about this simple star tool and how they were using it. And they never used the heart tool as a button to end a debate or end an angry argument again. So by simply changing a single image and not saying anything about it, Twitter actually changed an entire experience for users. They changed how users interacted with the tool set by simply leaning into the idea that iconography is a universal language that we speak at a global scale. And they knew that a star was a single image that took hold of many different meanings. The fact of the matter is a star is something that can mean good job. It's something that can simply mean, hey, look at this. It has so many different meanings. It's not really something that has one universal definition. But a heart, on the other hand, implies liking, loving, and approval. And so by simply taking a negative experience and switching out a symbol with something that's positive, Twitter was able to change an entire user behavior across the lifetime for the future of Twitter and Twitter users. Now, the reason I share this story with you is because this is what visual communication has the power to do. It's about our universal visual vernacular. We all speak and connect with each other visually on a very regular basis. And as a result, we actually have very subtle, almost instinctual reactions to small visual cues that we rarely even recognize are happening unless there's a jarring change. So let me kind of explain this in a bit more depth for you. The Twitter example is one example, but let me share a headline with you that gives another very interesting example of this. This is a headline that really just kind of made the rounds back in August. It was first released by a small study that happened in the UK. So it was first released through a variety of UK publications, then picked up here in the States and just spread like wildfire. Now, the concept was very simple. Generation Z feels intimidated by full stops. In other words, in texting and other short form conversations, Generation Z actually sees a full stop as a sign of anger. They see a full stop as a passive aggressive way of trying to pass a message to the person that you're talking to. It's a passive aggressive way of saying that what you're actually saying is the opposite. So in other words, Gen Z thinks that somebody might be angry at them if they're replying with a full stop. And the fact is if you dive into this a bit more, linguists looked at it and said, well, it makes sense. Gen Z, they're digital natives. They're used to communicating in short form text. And so when it comes down to it, they can understand that a full stop, that a period at the end of a text might actually come across as being a little aggressive or passive aggressive, simply because it's not really a used tool within the Gen Z toolbox of communication. Now, while I understand that, and I do agree with that, I mean, the fact of the matter is you look at the ways in which Gen Z communicates, and the UX, the UI design of these communication tools really does kind of force short form communication. Really, when you think about it, whether they're tweeting or posting on Facebook or posting to Instagram or sending a text, all of the text fields are inherently small. They encourage short form communication. And the fact of the matter is a period is just a way of simply defining the end or the conclusion of a thought. And so why would you need to use periods? Why would you need to conclude a thought or define the conclusion of a thought when the user interface does it for you? When a speech bubble or when your thought is perfectly wrapped in a speech bubble, for instance, in a text message. And so all of a sudden you can start to understand why this generation doesn't see the need for periods, and therefore assumes that if somebody is using them, that there's an ulterior motive to that use. But it goes beyond that, beyond simply this concept that the UI is doing the job for them. The fact of the matter is user experience and user interfaces have continued to change how we connect and communicate with one another. It's not just where we can place our text. It's not just the simple fact that there's a small form field to put your content in. It's also the addition of emojis. The fact of the matter is we have an entire generation that uses emojis as punctuation today. So we're no longer living in a world where the punctuation that's existed since as early as 300 BCE is valid anymore. Today, why use a period, a question mark, an exclamation point when you can better encompass your thoughts and feelings with an emoji? And that's the thing about digital natives. That's the thing about millennials. That's the thing about Gen Z. That's the thing about even young Gen Xers. We all kind of entered a wild west of the internet when it came out. And that wild west was something that no adults before us had really discovered or explored themselves. So there weren't rules of which to engage with one another. And when there aren't rules for engagement, we start to make the rules ourselves. And that's kind of what's happened with communication. We're living in a world where the rules have been made by the users themselves, but based on the tools available to them. And so when you have thousands upon thousands of visuals to contextualize your own feelings and your own thoughts, and you grow up in a world where you're communicating with people digitally more than you are face to face, you need to take advantage of all of these tools like emojis to contextualize your thoughts. You need to find a way to bring your intent forward in your communication. And that's exactly why today's digital natives are relying so heavily on speaking a visual language. And marketers out there are really working hard to meet that demand. In fact, the demand for visual content has grown exponentially since the iPhone came to the market, since we suddenly entered a world where we could experience so much information on a small screen. All of these different interactions that we have with products and technology have continued to lead us to an evolution of speaking and communicating visually. Today, a seemingly small visual cue can have an exceptionally large impact on the end user and can really drive various actions as well as various ways of interpreting your brand or service. And so rather than avoid this kind of young form of connecting that a lot of Gen Zs are pushing today, rather than avoid that, brands really need to lean into it. The fact of the matter is there's a generation that we should really be considering as the key driver of every decision we make as marketers, as UI, UX designers and developers, as product creators. And that generation is the visual generation. And the visual generation consists of young Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Z. Combined, they equal 64% of the consumer population. They are the most important set of consumers to cater to today. And they want and demand visual content as their primary form of communication and connection. So let's really get into this. Why do they demand this? And it really kind of comes down to a chicken or egg scenario. Which came first, the user interface or the behavior? Is it user interface that's driving behaviors, or did the behavior already exist and we evolved our user interface and user experiences to really cater to that behavior? Now, to answer this, we have to kind of dive into not just the behaviors of today, which is this overwhelming set of options now available to us to connect and communicate visually, but we have to kind of track back far beyond where we are today, far beyond the products and technology that have greatly improved our ability to connect with one another. And we have to really think about just how we are inherently driven. And the first thing to think about is this concept of the written word. The fact of the matter is we aren't innately made to read or write. We're not meant to communicate through the written word. It's something that we evolved to over millennia. It's something that took thousands of years for us to really become a culture and a society that connected based on the written word. And so before that, we're still able to communicate. We're still finding ways to connect with one another. And honestly, the very first form, the very first mode of communication was the most natural mode for us. It was cave paintings on walls, because instinctually, without any other tools at our disposal, we went towards visual content and visual communication as our primary mode of connecting with one another and sharing stories, far before we evolved to the written word. Now, when you think about what that means in the concept of just our brains, these just amazing organs that make humanity who we are, the fact of the matter is 30% of our entire cerebral cortex is dedicated entirely to visual processing. It's just made up of neurons upon neurons, all focused entirely on visual processing. You compare that to other senses that we have, touch and hearing being the two strongest in comparison to visual processing. And the fact of the matter is our cerebral cortex, only 8% of it is made up or has neurons firing for touch. Only 3% has neurons firing to really take in and comprehend what you're hearing. And the reason you don't see smell and taste on here is because they are actually under 1%. And so our cerebral cortex, the primary consciousness that drives us, is dedicated to visual processing above anything else. Now, let me put that into better perspective for you. The fact is that visual information gets to the brain 60,000 times faster than any other form of communication that exists today. 60,000 times faster. Let me unpack that for you to give you an idea of what that means. In a given hour, a person will read about 15,000 words. Now, they have to string those words together to create sentences. They have to string those sentences together to create concepts and meaning. And so in a given hour, they're maybe taking in about 700 key messages. And that's if we've got a lot of short sentences creating some good key points. In that same hour, the human mind will actually take in and compartmentalize 36,000 visual messages in that exact same hour. So when we're talking about the written word versus our ability for visual processing, in a good day, in a good hour, maybe you get about 700 messages in an hour of reading. But in that same hour, you're just subconsciously simply taking in 36,000 visual messages at a time. It's a stark difference. So we have this part of our brain that is just meant to communicate and connect with the world on a visual basis first and foremost. And so as you're trying to connect with your end audience, The best way to do that is through visual information and visual communication. Now, one of the most powerful tools out there to do that is video. In fact, video tends to be the most successful way to connect with your end audiences. 1 minute of video is worth 1.8 million words in comparison to somebody taking in a video versus sitting down and reading. So if you're trying to sell a product, if you're trying to get people through an experience on your website or into your conversion funnel, leading with a high quality video is going to be your absolute best bet. Now, when we're talking about high quality video, I do want to give you a few tips here. First and foremost, keep it under 90 seconds in length. And something that's been a really interesting trend over the past 2 years or so, we're actually seeing more and more people focus on 60 seconds or less in length. That can be pretty hard to do. So we do try to say, give yourself a break. Try it, if you go to 90 seconds, don't worry about it. But no joke, if you're at 91 seconds, the likelihood of people watching the video cuts in half. Anything over 90 seconds, people are not pressing play to watch. We have limited attention spans. We want to be spoon-fed information. Video is a great way to spoon-feed information, but the minute we see that it's going to be over 90 seconds, all of a sudden it doesn't become worth our time. So focus on keeping it under 90 seconds in length. Another big key to consider when it comes to video, keep it original and custom. Do not use stock imagery. Do not use a template, because when you're using a template, what you end up seeing is your competitor using the exact same template. And younger audiences, they can sniff that out. If you think about millennials and Gen Z, if you think about this concept of the visual generation, what's really important to consider is that this is a generation of creators themselves. We're people who use our smartphones all the time to shoot video and put up a Vine or put up a Snapchat or put up I'm apparently too old to say put up a talk or a TikTok. I don't even know what they're calling it. So I'm not Gen Z. I don't know what they're calling it, because Gen Z is the ones using TikTok right now. So we're putting up this type of content though all of the time. We're throwing things on Instagram left and right. We know what it takes to create a quick video. And so we look for brands and the services that are trying to get our business. We look for them to level up. We don't want them to be producing at the quality that we can produce. We want to see that they're producing at a much higher quality. So when you're thinking about video, it has to be custom. It has to be original illustration. It should be animation, not live action. These are all things that really help you succeed with video. Now, after going through that tangent, I also want to talk a little bit more about that brain science. The fact of the matter is we do lean in heavily on visual connection and visual communication. And one of the ways we have seen this especially improve a user experience online is by pairing very short form text with universal iconography. When you take universal iconography and you connect it with something as short as click here or buy now, anything like that, it actually increases your action. So it'll increase click-through rate because it improves comprehension. People more instinctually understand what they're seeing without actually even having to read the text. Now, one of the comparisons I give here is the wet floor sign that you'll see out and about in a non-pandemic world, back when we used to all go out and about and go to shopping malls and things like that. And we had to be warned about a wet floor if somebody had just washed it. Now, a wet floor sign shows somebody slipping and they're kind of half up in the air. Under it, it says usually piso mojado versus caution wet floor. Usually it's actually in a different language, but we don't need to even read the text. We don't even need to fully read caution wet floor. We just see the icon and we know We can slip, we can fall. In fact, we know we can slip, we can fall, we can break our back, we can get in a lot of pain. There's all these things that we know. We form paragraphs of understanding in our head from a single image. And when you pair those universal icons with short form text, our understanding and therefore our action goes up considerably. Now, when you're thinking about universal iconography, I highly suggest checking out the Noun Project online. The Noun Project is an utterly amazing website that crowdsources universal iconography. And so you can type in any noun and actually get a list of icons that match that noun. The first icon on that list is going to be the most popular. So it really helps you understand what icon universally resonates with people around the world. Now, because of this drive, because of our love of visual content and visual connection, the fact of the matter is 91% of today's audiences, I'm not just talking about the visual generation, I'm talking about all of the audiences today, 91% prefer visual content over traditional formats. They prefer to land on a website that is visually rich, that leads with a video first, and then iconography and data visualizations. And only after getting through that content, then some text, but short form text. You can really dive deeper into text heavy pages, deeper into your website, but your homepage and your key landing pages should have as little text as possible, actually, because audiences crave visual content over anything else. But let's talk a little bit more about these subtle cues, because in the end, the devil is in the details. You want to be impacting behavior to drive positive conversion rates on your website. You want to really drive people into that funnel. And the fact is visual content is what's going to attract them. But then all the ways you use visuals throughout your website, throughout your product design, or throughout even your marketing content, all of these little subtleties really do matter as to whether or not you're going to truly engage your audience and really bring them into that conversion funnel properly. So let's first talk about the cocktail party effect. This is one of my absolute favorite things to think about when it comes to visual content and connecting with your end audience. The cocktail party effect is this concept that we've all experienced. I'm going to have you think about the pre-COVID life that we all used to lead, okay? The world where we used to go out in loud and busy restaurants, or we used to go out to parties at friends' houses and connect with people who we hadn't seen in a while. The world where we could kind of siphon ourselves off into smaller conversations while in a loud, crowded room. Now, in that world, while all of us have experienced these really nice, intimate conversations with friends, where we're having just a one-on-one discussion in a very loud room, I'm sure you've all experienced this moment where you hear your name from across the room, and all of a sudden, the conversation that you're having kind of gets quiet. It might still keep going, but it goes down to your subconscious. Consciously, all of a sudden, you're hearing your name. That's what matters most to you, and your attention has shifted to whoever said your name across the room. This concept is called the cocktail party effect. The idea here is simply that we are actually taking in all of the noise, everything we're hearing around us at a subconscious level. And it's actually in brain science called your reticular activating system. It's this part of the brain that is just constantly processing information and deciding what is important for you personally. And what happens is when your name is suddenly mentioned, that's more important to you because psychologically, our names are the most beautiful words in the English language. So for me, the name Amy is the most beautiful word in the English language. For Lynn, it's Lynn. Everybody's name is, to them, the most beautiful word in the English language psychologically. Even if you hate your name, it's still that thing that will resonate and stand out from the crowd. So once we hear it, it comes to our conscious level. And at that point, when it comes to our conscious level, all of our attention goes that direction. So why am I explaining this when we're talking about visual information versus audible information? The reason I'm talking about this is because if we have the brain power to suddenly shut off what we're hearing the minute we hear something more attractive to us, more personal to us, and we have that power with only 3% of the brain being focused on audible processing. Well, consider what actually happens when 30% of our brain is focused on visual processing. The cocktail party of life that we are in, the cocktail party of the internet, of nonstop information access, the world of having a smartphone in our pockets and a laptop in front of us and a TV screen further in front of us, further in front of that. We live in this constant three screen world of information delivery. And because we are constantly in this cocktail party of information, it's up to brands and marketers to find ways to cut through the noise and get the right visual out there that resonates with your target audience. In other words, it's up to you to find visuals that are kind of the personalized name, if you will, of the people you're going after. So when you're thinking about small visual cues, you really have to consider who your target audience is. And you have to make visual choices that resonate with that target audience specifically, rather than trying to connect with the everyman. When you try to connect with the everyman, you're going to get lost in the noise. When you consider exactly who your target audience is, and you choose an illustration style that connects with that audience, and you choose a color palette that resonates with that audience, you choose fonts that connect with that audience, and then you choose some text-based messaging, very short form, that connects with that audience. These are the ways that you can cut through the noise and really stand out at the cocktail party. And the fact of the matter is it's really, really important to ensure that each visual you choose is dedicated specifically to that audience, because 90% of our capacity for processing all of our subconscious information, it's taken up by the visual system. So again, if in a crowded room, you can hear your name out of nowhere, think about just how powerful it is for visuals to drive meaning. And now think about your website, think about your product, think about your marketing collateral, and consider this. If you are relying heavily on the text within your website, your marketing collateral, or your product, if you're relying on that text to carry forward the value, you're already losing your opportunities. Because for as long as it's taken somebody to read that text, they have already visually processed your website, your product, or your marketing collateral. They've already subconsciously judged all of your content. So your text cannot be the primary value driver. It cannot be the primary tool that you use to connect with your audience or get them turning into a customer. Your visuals have to be your primary value driver instead. Now, the next thing to consider in the world of these visuals is fonts. Every font that you choose is going to make a significant difference in how your users interact with your product or your service, or how they perceive it. For instance, maybe you are running a wedding preparation or wedding planning company. Well, in a situation like that, it makes perfect sense to use a script-based font like this elegant one that you see here. But if you're trying to sell let's say, a brand new SaaS solution that is going to connect marketers to the best possible leads out there. The last thing you want to do is use an elegant font, because that's not going to intrigue a marketer. It's not going to say to a marketer, this is the most powerful tool that you can have to connect with your target audience. Instead, you want to choose a font that actually really drives either authority or drives that kind of powerful feeling. And so when you're thinking about something as simple as your font choices, it's really important to consider the fact that fonts carry forward meaning. Now, for all of your marketing materials, for your product, for product design, or for website design, for anything like that, what you don't want to do is go font crazy. You don't want to be in a place where you are using far too many fonts, because that actually ends up feeling cluttered to the eye. It feels disjointed and lacking in quality. Instead, what you want to do is choose 2 to 3 fonts at most. Now, when you're choosing these fonts, pick one font to always be your headline font and your call to action font. Don't choose 2 different fonts for that, just one, because then we will actually start to recognize the pattern with our eyes as a user, as a customer, and start to hone in on the key headlines that matter or the calls to action that matter. A headline font like that, it should usually be bold in one way, shape, or form. It can be thin and bold, but ultimately it needs to stand out versus feeling too thin for a viewer to really see it. Now, your secondary font can be subhead font. Subhead font can be your header font that's just simply regular style instead of bold weight. And then finally, you want a text font. Your text font should be easy to read and take in. It should be something very neutral. Specifically, something sans serif is going to be the best way to go. Sans serif means it doesn't have these kind of little extra glyphs on them like you see in Times New Roman. A great sans serif font that works wonderful online is Helvetica. So any body copy that you have in any of your marketing content, in any of your product design, anything like that, go with something easy to read and digest like Helvetica. But don't be afraid to lean into bolder, more exciting fonts for headlines, subheads, and calls to action. If you're looking for a really cool resource for fonts, there's a site online. It's called Lost Type. Lost Type is the best place to find fonts for the visual generation. That's the generation that will really resonate with fonts like that. Now, when you're thinking about fonts, it's also important to note that they do bring forward a level of trustworthiness. So consider exactly how much or exactly what you're saying to your audience when you want to gain their trust. Make sure you're choosing a font that truly does drive trust. And if you look at this chart right here, the fonts that drive the most trust are going to be Helvetica and Trebuchet. You'll see Georgia works pretty well. And then Comic Sans is just a heck no, don't use Comic Sans, but I think that's pretty much common practice at this point. And if we want to think about gaining trust with fonts, here's a perfect example of a font choice gone bad and exactly how it can totally take away the trust. I will tell you, I will never, ever hire this clown for my niece's birthday parties. The next thing I want you to think about is your color choices. Now, for years, all of these studies went all over the internet saying you need to have red or orange buttons on your website. Those drive conversions. I'm here to tell you that that is just 100% BS today. When the internet first took off and was, something where people were starting to browse the web and jump onto a bunch of different websites and really start to experience custom websites and custom online tools, at that point in time, the pattern of using red buttons just kind of became a thing. But we are all used to the internet now. We're all used to interacting with so many different types of technology and products. The fact of the matter is color theory has been entirely debunked. Color theory is not actually something that truly exists today. And the reason is because different cultures respond to colors differently, number one. But number two, we're all so globally universal right now that we don't really put a lot of stock in colors. The only time you should really focus on choosing colors that matter is in two instances. One, if you're going after a local clientele, colors matter. Pick the colors of the local sports team and you will see a lot of success. Two, make sure that you use your colors uniformly. So I'm going to give you an example of what I mean. And this looks like just a complete mess in front of you, but I promise you it is not. What you see here are two different infographics, one on the left, one in the middle, and then finally we have just close-ups of the two infographics on the far right. Now, whenever I ask people, which infographic would you think was the most successful? The majority of people say the one in the middle seems like it would be the most successful. The reality is the one on the left has done millions upon millions in sales. It's a poster that was created by Pop Chart Labs. Now, the reason the one on the left is so successful is partially because of its use of colors, and secondarily because it is standing out at the cocktail party. Let me explain what I mean. The one on the left is targeting people who love Apple. It's targeting engineers, targeting product developers, targeting UX UI designers. It's targeting people who really have a great understanding of the history of Apple. And as a result, every single visual choice in this left-hand image was made to resonate with somebody who loves Apple products. First and foremost, we have the framing of the actual poster as an original Finder window from the original OS. The scroll bar that would normally be there is a timeline. And so that's kind of a fun way of utilizing that user interface, but for a different purpose. And then the color choices are actually meant to depict the original Apple logo. Now, this is showing the different Apple products over time. We have software on the left, input, output in yellow, desktop tower in orange, all-in-one in red, laptop in purple, and handheld in blue. So the colors carry forward more meaning than just this is a hats off to the original Apple logo. There's actual ordering of information based on the colors as well. And then finally, the actual kind of swirling of the colors that you see is meant to be a tip to the hat of the supposed acid trip that Steve Jobs had when he came up with the idea for Apple. There are also little Easter eggs in here. For instance, 556 items. This is specifically related to a set of code that had to do with the original OS of Apple. So there's all of these little kind of visual cues that are speaking directly to the target audience. As a result of speaking directly to that target audience, this single poster has done over $4 million in sales. Now, the image in the middle, yeah, it had a lot of shares online, but it also was ripped to shreds. And the reason it was ripped to shreds was because of the use of colors. There is no meaning in the use of colors here. The red branches don't connect to one another. The green branches don't connect to one another. There's no sorting based on the colors. This is really just eye candy for eye candy's sake. And as a result, it maybe cast a wide net, but they didn't see the success that they were looking for. When you're doing any type of user interface design, how you use your colors matter. In this example, every single time you see the pink color, that pink color is actually directly speaking to the exact same group of people. Same with the blue color, same with the yellow color. So make sure that you're always using the same color for the same category of information, because that does make a significant difference in how we take in that information. And finally, the other big thing I want to talk to you about is text. Today's audiences are not reading. They're not taking the time to read a website that has 600 or more words. They're going to read maybe 20% of it and bounce away if you're lucky. So when you are laying out a website, what you don't want to do is something like this. If we look at CNN's site, you don't know where to click. It's great that they're using subtle visual imagery to let you know where videos are. That is a big win here. It's also great that they're using colors very intentionally, and they're also bolding fonts where it matters. But this is an exceptionally text-heavy user experience. I don't know what to do first or what matters most. But if I jump to something like BuzzFeed, the entire experience is completely different. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is because you would be surprised to know that BuzzFeed is considered the most engaging news website online. Every other news site out there hasn't been able to compete with the number of shares and the number of views that BuzzFeed articles have. And it is because BuzzFeed keeps things clean, simple, and never has you face a wall of text as your first form of information delivery. So when you're thinking about text and how you're using it, consider this. Always think about context. It's a con when you use too much text, period. Now, in the end, one of the biggest and most important things to consider is going to be design. 94% of brands' first impressions are based on design, whether that be the design of your marketing collateral, the design of your product itself, the design of something as simple as the product packaging, or the design of your user experience or your user interface. 94% of first impressions will be based entirely on design because people are subconsciously taking in all the visual information and are forming opinions before they're reading anything. So you need to focus on high quality design. You need to put form and function together. Here's an example where the form, the design was not a bad design, but they didn't consider the function. They didn't consider the location of the design. And you end up with a drastic mistake like this. You don't want to overuse typography just for the sake of eye candy. The typographic choices here say donate to help end children instead of what it's supposed to say. And that's just simply because of the wrong use of typography. Instead, consider the location of the content you're producing. Make sure that you're using an entirely original illustration. Make sure you're using as little text as possible. Make sure you're utilizing your fonts for headlines and key areas that you want to drive attention. You have to consider the function. You have to consider where your content is going to exist, how people are going to interact with it, and make visual choices based on that and based on what will resonate with your target audience. You have to consider at all times custom, original, and quality, because today's audiences can create their own content in minutes. They expect brands to do something better than they can do. So when you're thinking about successful visual content, make sure you're showing an investment of time, attention to detail, a clean layout and hierarchy of information, expert use of typography, accurate data viz, and custom illustration. Now with that, we have a little bit of time for some questions. I do want to let you guys know that my book, Killer Visual Strategies, goes into how to do all of this in depth. There are 8 rules that you have to follow for creating great visual content. It shows you exactly how to do that and takes you through a lot of exercises. So I definitely suggest checking it out if you have a chance. And let's jump into some questions.
Great, Amy. Thank you so much. Okay, that was a lot, and I was taking a bunch of notes too. There were 2 websites you referred to. Can you remind us again? What was the one about the nouns?
Yes, thenounproject.com, phenomenal website. And
that
then
like THE, the Noun Project, or Noun?
Correct. The Noun Project.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna go check
and
that.
Then, oh, it's great. And then Lost Type.
TYPE, no S, Lost Type.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was worth the price of admission for me today, just to get those. Thank you so much. And I will say to all of our members, I have a copy of the book. So if you'd like to check it out with me before purchasing, feel free. But there's so much in there. It's just it's a thing to have on the shelf. Honestly, it's a bit of eye candy on its own for that. And does anyone else have some questions specifically? Maybe you can even take a chance at a little bit of consulting here. If you say, hey, I'm working on something on my website. I'm going to give everybody else a chance because I have one more question. Okay, so Jenna has a question. Hang on. Jenna says, content marketing has generally been moving away from display and print ads toward native sponsored content. Viewers' eyes scan over the ads without thinking. What are your thoughts on how modern marketers could marry this trend with a drive toward more visual communication?
Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely. The fact is we've learned to just ignore ads. That said, we have actually created a number of very successful ads by doing two things. First, focusing entirely on who that target audience is and choosing visuals that are specific to that target audience. But second, by making the ads interactive. Interactive content online has an average 70% conversion rate. So when you make an ad interactive, you can actually get somebody jumping right into the conversion funnel from the start. But there's also another way to go. The other way to go is to lean into social advertising. The fact is it's one of the best places out there to really connect with target audiences. And with social advertising, you can basically say, hey, I've got 50 different target audiences. I'm going to create 50 different versions of this ad to make them really unique for each target audience. And then you can really go after each target audience like that. With something like that, we find that short form, about 15-second video clips, those tend to work the best, usually animated clips. Those work really well in social advertising. Second to video clips is going to be a high quality illustration with very short text. When I'm saying short text, 6 words or less, and you'll see a lot of success with that as well.
Sounds like what you're saying is like, because we think about content marketing and we think about, we need to generate some unique content to inform our potential customers and, kind of bring our credibility in. But of course, that's usually all words, right? So, So thinking creatively about how to do content marketing visually, I think is also a challenge for us.
Yeah.
Great. Again, we have time for maybe one more question. I learned so much today. I have this long list of things I've got to go do now. All right, I welcome you all again to reach out if you have questions after the fact. We'll be happy to do this. This was recorded. You can share it with your teams. Go to isbm.com/library and you'll find it there for about 30 days. And then after that, it'll be in B2B Pulse. Thank you all again for joining us. Lori, do we have a question that we can put up as a poll before we lose everybody, or do we not do that today? We might have not done that today. Oh, look, great. All right, thanks so much. We'd like to just capture, while we have you, your feedback on the webinar. Would you please just click on what you see here? So it didn't cover topics that I expected. It wasn't that great. It was a good topic, but it didn't go as deep as I liked, to not good as other things, but I've been attending, good discussion and outstanding. If you just give a click through there, we're gonna give you another 5 or 6 seconds before you leave. We really appreciate your feedback. That helps us get better and better at offering the right kinds of topics in the areas that you want. All right, I think that's good, Lori. Thanks so much for